Assalamu alaikum. The topic of my discussion is anthropogenic risks and the promises of Islamic economics. Anthropogenic refers to the degenerative impacts of human actions and business activities on the biological capacity of Earth and the biosphere. The word is recognized in the Holy Quran in Surah Ar-Rum, verse 41, an established responsibility. The word facade has been used. Facade, mafasid are the global public harms or climate crises caused by negative externalities of human actions and business practices. So the overarching question which I am going to share my ideas with you is what is the position of Islamic economics and finance with regard to the man-made climate crisis? I will try to raise the answer in three questions. What is the evidence of that? What are the root causes and what are the promises of Islamic economics? The global mean temperatures during 1880 and 2021. Earth's temperatures has risen by 0.8 Celsius per decade since 1880, but the rate of warming since 1981 is more than twice. Looking into the future, we are at present in 1.2C and the Paris Agreement fixes 1.5C targets, whereas all estimates of the global warming by 2100, we follow status quo, will be 3.9C, and optimistic scenarios are 2.6C, which means if all Paris Agreement's commitments are met, we will reach 2.6C. As a result of that, almost in all areas of human systems and sectors and ecosystems and sectors, there would be disasters. Basically, the effect of global warming will be serious in all those areas. Over the last 4 decades, biocapacity of Earth is the universally shared natural public asset. The sustainability crisis, the degeneration of the Earth's biocapacity starts somewhere in the 60s and continues to grow. If we look at the annual biocapacity of Earth, it is seriously being degenerated. As a result of that, the global leadership is preoccupied with climate crisis as the number one risk facing the global economy and which drives every other risk. So what are the reasons? We look at this crisis from two perspectives, shareholders capitalism and stakeholders capitalism. But in fact, these two converge in their ultimate outcome. Whereas the shareholders capitalism is concerned, which the focus of which is maximization of man capital, and most of us are familiar with Samuelson's circular flow diagram, in which there are factor markets, households, product markets, businesses, and the central idea in this is that high discount rates preferred as we can subjectively feel present more than the future. This framework is disembodied. It doesn't refer to the society and it doesn't refer to the ecological environment. As a result, negative externalities are recognized but trivialized, and positive externalities of human action are exaggerated. In 2018, Nordos, who is the co-author of Samuelson's Economics, he won the Nobel Prize. And when he was awarded the Nobel Prize, the Foreign Policy magazine carried an article with the caption "The Nobel Prize for Climate Catastrophic," in which they highlighted that his work is hugely influential and entirely misguided. The core idea of Norda's work is that we can keep 2100 temperatures open to 3.5 C and adapt to it accordingly because mitigation will be too costly. It's not only in the area of climate warming, global warming, but also waste, air and water pollution and exclusion, which are the result of the disembodied paradigm. When we look at the stakeholders capitalism, the ESG is nowadays a lot of popular ecology, society, and economy have to be embedded with each other. The latest information provided by the database of MSCI shows that listed companies, including those reporting on the ESGs, are on the track to make the world 2.9C warmer. So we staying in the stakeholders capitalism, we have the framework of the SDGs. The SDGs offer an embedded framework where the economy is embedded in the society is embedded into the biosphere and ecological environment, but with conflicting goals. An example of the conflicting goals is that if we keep HDI on the vertical axis and the number of Earths in achieving those HDI on the horizontal axis, then we can see that the high HDI countries are exceeding the one Earth capacity, whereas the low HDI countries are within the one Earth capacity. So what promises Islamic economics can offer in this? First of all, stop the degeneration of the Earth's biocapacity. Second, restore the Earth's biocapacity. And third, regenerate the Earth's biocapacity. And looking at again at the paradigms, the status quo paradigm will give us 4C global temperatures by the year 2100, and the ESG paradigm will give us up to 3C, whereas the SDG paradigm is trying to establish 1.5C, the Paris Agreement. So the question is, can Islamic economics and a Maqasid-driven paradigm keep the global temperatures lower than 1.5C? So the goal would be to have high HDI but within the 1 Earth capacity. So the high HDI countries have to transform their economies to bring their activities within the 1 Earth capacity, whereas the low HDI countries have to improve on their HDI within the 1 Earth capacity. So what Islamic economics and finance can offer in that is the Maqasid al-Sharia is an embedded framework of very popular in Islamic economics, and latest literature of the Sharia scholars emphasize that the ecological balance and biodiversity should be considered as one of the core objectives of the Maqasid. So if we put the the climate crisis in the framework of the Maqasid al-Sharia and restoration of the universally shared natural asset, the biocapacity of Earth, positive externalities of our business actions, business activities and other actions would be considered as masaleh within the framework of the Maqasid. And the role of this positive externality is restoration and regeneration of the shared natural asset. And negative externalities will be considered as mafasid, and they are actually degrading and depleting the shared natural asset. So positive externalities minus negative externalities, if these are greater than zero, then the system or the activity which or the business is considered, we will consider it degenerative. If positive externalities minus negative externalities are equal to zero, balancing out, then that is sustainable. If positive externalities minus negative externalities are greater than zero, then the business would be considered as regenerative. So we are expecting that within the framework of the Maqasid, sustainability is not the ideal. The ideal is regeneration of the Earth's biocapacity. So ecological and environmental intent of the Sharia would be maximize and preserve masalih and minimize and prevent mafasid, which are global public benefits, positive externalities. So here is a framework. We have the positive externalities and we have the negative externalities. Starting from 1960, the Earth's biocapacity is degenerating at a fast rate. So the first thing is to stop that and then to start regenerating the Earth's biocapacity. So can we achieve that? What are the preconditions for that? The first one is the behavioral norms, and the second one would be business criteria, and the third one technologies and innovations. Number four, policy and regulatory support. Five, future-ready institutions. Six, effective partnership, and seven, design of financial contracts. And in the center of all these from the social side is the social institutions of zakah, awqaf, charities, family support. So let's pick up on the Islamic behavioral norms. The first and foremost among these is that man is the trustee of Allah on earth and his responsibilities exceed that of making only profits. And man establishes al-Mizan as a trustee of Allah, the universal balance, implements zero waste, which is israf, and zero extravagance, which is tabzir, protects the rights of passive stakeholders, future generations and other species, is mercy for the world, avoids riba, gharar, and gambling, promotes masaleh and prevents mafasid, is al-amin and al-sadiq, trustworthy and truthful, follows the fasatiyah, the middle path, and in the center of all this in Islamic economy are the social institutions of zakah, awqaf, charities, and family support. So Al-Mizan, we have to look at it from the new perspective of having ecological and environmental balance. The second precondition of establishing that is the economic framework for the analysis. As we mentioned, the problem arises from the man-made capital as the central uh, uh, pivot of the system, and from there we have to move to a system where there are at least four forms of capital. The man-made capital is this would be with the same certain qualification, but then more importantly, we have natural capital and spiritual capital. Natural capital, natural resources, and natural laws, putting them together, and then the society's social capital. The third point, the second point was with respect to the impactful business criteria. So to internalize the externalities, we have to adopt different business criteria. For example, zero waste would be one of the criteria, zero emissions is one, another criteria, zero riba and gharar would be another criteria, forbearance. The institution Al-Af is an important institution which we have to develop, and indeed, service to society is an important parameter. The other side of the same story is that actually the sustainable business models and supply chains are increasingly becoming popular and supported by policies in different countries. Cleaner production processes and zero waste, design of products, long life, non-toxic, these are becoming actually the center of policies. After sales service and repair, end of life recollection, reuse and recycling, relying on green energy and CO2 sequestering, everything as a service, as a business model, sharing platforms, and above all, behavioral change are basically these are becoming very much in the agenda of strategic transformation of economies. So those things will have an implications also for the Sharia governance from the halal. If we add to it purification of environmental and ecological impurities, then we have halal and Taiwan, which is also a Quranic concept. So if we move on from halal to halal and Taiwan by purification of environmental and ecological externalities, in other words, by internalizing the externalities, the cost of doing business will increase in the initial stages. So, therefore, we need to rethink the mandates of Islamic commercial and social finance and the design of financial contracts. And we need also a lot of collaboration with ethical and socially responsible finance and economics on the basis of shared responsibilities. A very good example of that is the I for impact, blending Islamic finance and impact investing for global goals, IRTI and UNDP publication 2017. And we need to rethink the mandate of Islamic social and commercial finance with respect to two architectural foundations of the financial system, the cost of finance and the requirement for the collateral. For the cost of finance, those businesses which are becoming more maqasid driven, as we mentioned, the cost of doing business may be more in the initial stages, they need a subsidy, and this subsidy can be created by the social finance. And for the collateral, which ultimately leads to foreclosure, we have to develop the alternative of the al-af as an alternative. Social, the sharing society's risk is the primary responsibility mandate of the social finance. And now we have identified another critical problem of the society, which is the degeneration of the biocapacity of Earth. And in this changing the challenge, the responsibility of social finance should also change, and whereby we understand that it is very much understandable that in many activities the degenerative nature of the activity cannot be avoided. Like we need to travel to do our business, and when travel emits, it is a degenerative business. There are so many other businesses like that, but the important thing is to have a change of thinking about this type of degeneration. And if the degeneration is happening, if that is accepted, then to overcome that degeneration, some voluntary compensation can be expected, which can go into the sustainable social finance funds, and then those funds can provide subsidies to sustainable and regenerative businesses. So if we look at the current situation of Islamic finance, social finance, and philanthropic finance, and the commercial finance, that the arrows diverge. But if we put the impactful businesses, responsible businesses in the center, then we can expect to redirect the arrows to that particular goal, thereby creating an environment where social finance and philanthropic and development finance, working with commercial finance, can support those type of transformation of the businesses from high externalities to low externality businesses, and there will be a win-win for all the parties. A good example of that is the ISDB and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation blended Murabaha funding for polio eradication program of Pakistan. And we know that polio eradication is a 100% regenerative business. So is the case with any other type of vaccination programs like the COVID-19 vaccination, which is 100% regenerative activity. So there is in that framework, there is a need to rethink the relationship between social finance and commercial finance and other stakeholders like impact investors, governments, development agencies, philanthropic foundations, Islamic social finance, and Islamic finance. The rethinking framework for that is actually existing, which is the SDG 17 for the collaboration of the stakeholders. And then, of course, science, technologies, and innovations are supporting the transformation of the businesses to minimize the externalities like material elements separation is a chemistry activity which primarily aims at to separate the toxic materials so that the remaining can be clean, especially in the built environment, in construction and steel. That is very important. Carbon sequestering and recycling, solar and clean energy, regenerative biology, agriculture, biodegradable packaging, green fintech, and GLT. All these add to the decarbonization and ecosystem restoration. Industrial economies are coming up in different countries with an emphasis to reach zero waste in the industries as well as in the municipal as well as in the household activities. In Islamic economy, we need to promote restorative, sustainable, and regenerative businesses. We need at least two institutions, environmental HISBA as well as the value-based financial institutions. And of course, there is a need for policy support which recognizes the importance of the Maqasid al-Sharia, national visions, and the global goals, and to create harmony between those three. And of course, there is a need for regulatory support which is coming in the form of value-based intermediation and responsible finance, everything as a service, greening capital markets, institutional symbiosis, and circular supply chains back to technologies and energy transition inclusive policies. And then financial services best practices are changing the IFRS Integrated Sustainability Standards, the TCFD disclosures, the ESG and sustainability disclosures, Basel Committee and Prudential disclosures, unique principles of responsible banking, investment and insurance, VBI scorecard. And of course, there is a need for multidisciplinary scorecard because the system, if we have to see it from that perspective, which I am talking about, has to be multidisciplinary and extremely complex. So therefore, the scorecard has to be multidisciplinary. And given that there's a lot of hope that the economies are transforming to becoming more greener and sustainable, which offers a lot of opportunities for the teaching and research institutions for developing national and business strategies, policies, and practices to promote resilience, including starting from the climate resilience, transformative research and advisory services, new attributes of leadership development, academic programs, curriculum, and pedagogy. And then this will have a lot of implication for Islamic climate finance, for climate adaptation and mitigation, because every policy is directing to climate mitigation and adaptation. Every product has to address that particular objective. And we need to develop integrated perspectives uh, instead of having an emphasis on one perspective. We have to look at different perspectives and integrate the strengths of those different perspectives. So, in conclusion, looking ahead, the prospects of maximization of positive and minimization of negative externalities are high due to the Islamic norms of behaviors, and which is a responsible behavior is individual behavior is becoming worldwide in importance. The Muqassidas Sharia strategic framework, restorative and regenerative business models are becoming more popular. Green disruptive technologies are providing the support and leading into the future. And value-based finance and regulation is becoming more dominant and more mainstream. So because of this, there is a great hope that Islamic economics can really contribute to the minimization of externalities and improving on the climate agenda. Thank you very much.